We had our second listening session in October. That is where we did kind of a workshop where we identified priorities, and so we ranked different priorities about what was important to us for a schedule change. And we'll talk about what those results were. Our stakeholder committee met again last month and talked about, okay, how can we give people something tangible to react to? What kind of data do we need in order to move this decision-making process forward? And so then, as Dr. Gillison said, today, we are going to be gathering feedback on those potential proposals. And then the stakeholder committee will meet again in January. And then the goal is to present this then to the school board by the end of January. I do want to just reiterate, as we're talking about this process, we did not walk into this with a goal or kind of a preset idea of what, wanted to have happen. The conversation was started, and so this is just a way for us to look at this holistically, but there's no kind of preset agenda on here. And so I just want to remind us all of that. Okay. So our stakeholder committee was really there to kind of help guide us and make sure that we had a transparent decision-making process, and then also will help craft that final recommendation to the school board. So again, really appreciate the time that those folks have dedicated to this. All right, so let's talk about what we learned last time. So we asked folks at the last listening session to look at different kinds of priorities and then rank them by what was most important when they were considering a schedule change. What kind of things did they want to see prioritized in that discussion? So teachers and staff, kind of work-life balance and health and well-being and things rose to the top. I will say the demographics that we found there were a lot of teachers in that room, but teachers and parents, right? Student health then was our second priority that came forward, and then safety was the third. And so these are the three things that we really kind of tried to zero in on as we had subsequent discussions after that workshop listening session that we did. One thing, though, that I want to note is we knew from the start that there are some things that were just non-negotiable. They couldn't be deprioritized. So one of those was transportation. Obviously, any solution put forward has to be feasible for some kind of busing, getting kids to and from school. Obviously, there are regulations that govern us and contractual requirements, and those are not something that we could use this process necessarily to move around. Those are, baseline standards. And then safety, even though we discussed safety and we did, talk about that as a priority, safety is still a baseline criteria here, right? We got to make sure that kids are safe when they're traveling to and from school. So these are three things that, we also had to kind of measure any proposals against as we moved forward. That's not right. Okay, here we go. Sorry, folks, 1 second. We're having technical difficulties. All right. Here, we should be good. Okay. So one of the things that has definitely been a topic of conversation from the start of this process is transportation and the bus schedules and challenges with that. So we did spend a lot of time with our Chief Operating Officer, Rob, in order to really kind of understand that and understand what those constraints are. I'm going to have Rob do a little bit of talking just to kind of let us know this is the reality that we are dealing with right now, just to kind of level set what we have and what we can work within.
Good evening. Thank you. Hear me okay? A little bit louder, a little bit closer. Okay. So thank you, Leslie. Rob Weinheimer, Chief Operating Officer. I've been in the role for about 2.5 years. Why am I qualified to talk about buses? Previously, I was a director of transportation at Columbus City Schools for a year. Previously to that, I was an operations manager at Columbus. And then before that, I was actually here working for our transportation department for 6.5 years. This is scenario planning. So what we're going to get into tonight is creating scenarios based off different bell times, different load counts, different locations. We ended up going through 55 of these during the first 6 months of my time at Columbus City Schools during COVID. So I'm no stranger to this. So I actually take this pretty well. I enjoy it. And I'd like to take the opportunity to explain how our system currently runs. So we call it a 4-tiered system, or a grade band, or you can call it 4 different bell schedules. So we have our junior high that goes first, high school, middle school, elementary. What we can do with a bus is pretty phenomenal. We can turn one bus over 4 different times in the afternoon, turn that same bus over 4 times in the morning. Our bus capacity is about 80. And yes, we do have some routes that we fill to the capacity, but a lot of them we don't. The rural routes, we won't fill to 80. We might have 25, 30 kids. We will unload and load a bus, one bus for an entire neighborhood or an apartment complex, etc. So we are a very efficient system. So we can transport, one bus can do 200 up to 240, transport 240 kids in the morning or the afternoon. If you go off of a 4-tier system, now you start reducing efficiency by only turning that bus around 3 times, 2 times, 1 time. And the lower you go down in tiers, the more resources you need to do the work. What's a resource? Time, bus driver. Turnaround time is big for us, and thank you to the principals and any of the staff that work on the ground at bus release time to get those kids on the bus, because we give you 7 minutes, and that's pretty phenomenal for you guys to unload a building for parent pickup lines and buses in 7 minutes. So we need at least 30 to 35 minutes of drive time to make the 4-tier system work, because we have to load for 7 minutes, drive off campus, get to the first stop. Let's say we facilitate 10 to 15 stops along the way. Then we have to drive back to the next school. And for our bus drivers to do that within 30 to 35 minutes is very impressive. And times that by 71, they do a very good job. So that is our model. And Leslie, did you want me to hit anything else? Oh, off to the side. So high school has 3,100 eligible students for a bus. I'm going to ask for some participation. Does anyone know how many actually ride the bus, a percentage? Out of 100%, how many do you think actually ride a bus at high school level? Leslie Kelly wins the prize. It's exactly 40%. It's between 40 and 42%. So she wins the Price is Right. So just take that number, and that tells you how many, and times it by 0.42, that tells you how many riders we actually have. Then junior high is a little bit more. That's roughly about 50%, 60%. And then middle school and elementary is really where our ridership exists. Those kiddos and those families really depend on the bus. So that's our highest ridership. Some of the anomalies here, you can tell, middle school has the least amount of eligible riders. That requires the least amount of buses. Elementary has the most amount of eligible riders, right? Yep. And has the highest ridership. So we use the most buses at that time. And, thank you for being here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them at the end or via email, which will be put in the chat, and I have business cards here with me tonight, but I'll be talking more, so.
And we will, we will be pausing for some questions at various points through here. And so that's thank you for reminding me, Rob. If folks at home have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And then for folks here, raise your hand, but we'll pause for questions in a second. Okay, let's see if we can. Okay. So let's get into some of these proposals, right? And start talking about the nitty gritty. All right. So first question though, before we start that, I also want to know what grade levels you're representing. So if you're a teacher, then please indicate which grade band you're in. If you're a teacher and a parent, you can click multiple grade bands in here. If you have multiple children, go ahead. There's no limit to how many of these boxes you can check, but just so that we kind of understand what we're talking about here. Excellent. Oh, and if anybody has joined late, particularly those folks at home, at the top of your screen, there are still those instructions for to get onto Menti, as long as as well as the code is up there, so you can still join in even if you miss the first round. All right, excellent. Looks like voting has slowed down. Okay. All right, so we have 4 options that we're going to talk about tonight. So option number 1 is a do nothing option. Option number 1 says, you know what, we're going to maintain this current schedule. It's not really going to address any of the concerns that have been raised during this process. It does not adhere to the sleep research necessarily, because again, those junior high and high school grade bands are starting pretty early. There we go. Okay, I won't do that again, hopefully. Okay, thank you. And one thing also to just kind of note is, you know, again, there have been concerns raised about the busing system. And so even if we maintain this current system, some possible improvements that the district is looking at are adding 8 to 10 additional routes for some of that improved efficiency. That is going to require about a year of planning, and that also includes recruitment of those new drivers, as well as then 1.3 million in annual operating expenses. So that's on top of what we are paying. So these are things that, again, are being explored right now. These are not real proposals that have been put forth quite yet, but just kind of talking about what the future can look like. Okay, so this is option 1. I'm going to go through the options and then we're going to start voting on them and having some discussion. Okay, all right. Okay, so option number 2, this option really prioritizes the sleep research. So essentially what we've done is we have tried to move junior high and high school to the later time starts, and then having elementary and middle school starting earlier. A couple things about this. First of all, as you'll notice, this doesn't have 35 minutes necessarily in between each of these. And so essentially what this does is it changes our bus system from a 4-tier to a 2-tier system. So you would need to have essentially your elementary and middle schools are starting around the same time, junior high and high school are starting around the same time. One of the concerns that was raised about this option was the issue of after-school childcare. So when you have your older students getting out after your younger students, for some families, we recognize that that might cause a childcare issue. That may also cause a childcare issue even if you don't have older siblings participating in that. But there are concerns then about, is there enough childcare in the community to address this increased capacity with elementary school students getting out earlier? So those are some of those concerns. However, again, this one is prioritizing the sleep research. There are other issues that are associated with it. This option would require about 2 years planning and acquisition. So we would need to get new buses because we are essentially kind of doubling the load by grouping these grade bands together like that. We would need 87 new drivers to make this work. And so that would be about 11.5 million increase in our operating expenses. That's just what it would take to make this work. Again, this schedule prioritizes the sleep research over all else. Okay, option 3. So this option is really kind of focused on getting students out earlier. So particularly one of the things that we heard was that our younger students are, struggling later in the afternoon. And so, this idea of, can we shift that up? This is a more moderate schedule change. So as you'll notice, we're talking about 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. This is not necessarily a significant change, but this one helps, kind of inch that forward a little bit. This would change our bus system from a 4-tier to a 3-tier. You would have your junior high and your high school students riding together, correct, Rob? So you would have those 2 grade bands riding together. We did hear concerns about combining grade bands. So you certainly don't want elementary students riding with high school students. And so that is, something to kind of consider. This schedule option would address those after school childcare needs because your older students are out earlier and so therefore can help with that. But most grade bands, except for junior high, would be getting out earlier. might allow some more time for extracurriculars. And when I say extracurriculars, I don't only mean school-sponsored activities, right? Anything that students are doing in the afternoon. This option would require, again, 2 years of planning and acquisition, new buses, new drivers. We'd need 66 new drivers with this option, and this would be about $8 million increase in our annual operating expenses. Right? Option 4 is one that we feel really prioritizes the student safety. So in this situation, we still have our older students getting out earlier. So, high school, junior high, and then elementary school and middle school, they're getting out. We're still moving that up a little bit. This maintains the 4-tier bus system, and it shifts the elementary school students particularly up to address those afternoon attention concerns that we heard particularly in our first listening session. The other really big driver for this, particularly, as the stakeholder committee was considering this, is junior high right now is starting at 7:15 a.m. That's really early for them to be getting on the bus. They're outside, especially this time of year, they're in the dark. Younger students are sometimes, traveling home in the dark. And so this one we really felt like was an opportunity to try and, squeeze those a little bit and get students off of the streets earlier or later, depending on morning or afternoon. However, we have squeezed this quite a bit to the point where in order to make this work, you still would need some additional drivers just because of that turnaround time that Rob was talking about. So this option would require still a couple years of planning and acquisition, 16 new drivers, and 1.7 million in additional operating costs. I'll get to it in 1 second. So this is another option. Again, this prioritizes student safety over everything. And then based on, the current status of our transportation system and things like that, these are just the realities that it's going to take to make that happen. Okay, so what I want to do is these are our 4 options. Our next slides are going to then start going into our discussion about them. Before we start discussion, I want to open this up for questions. So I'm going to take questions from the audience, and then Whitney is going to be getting questions out of the chat. So anybody at home, please feel free to write your question in the chat, and we will elevate that. So we'll start here.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I understand correctly. Are we going with the assumption that if we don't change anything, the cost is going to be 1.3 million additional? So this essentially means that taking this option as opposed to the current option is going to be $400,000 difference?
Nope. Thank you, Brad. So it's a possible improvement. So currently we're 71 routes, and I think we all can agree that we all want to see a bus at 4:05 sitting at the elementary waiting on students. That used to be the way. That used to be how it worked in the days of plenty, when we had enough drivers, when there was, what's the right word? We didn't have as many students enrolled. We had more drivers, less students. That worked then. Then a thing called COVID hit us, and it even started a little bit before COVID, and it just disrupted the industry. Coming back from COVID, we've really not recovered. We're getting there. We're very close to being back to where we were. And now we can focus on, and thank you to the board and administration for working with us to get more resources into the transportation department, because it is really paying dividends. So thank you to everyone involved there. We can add 8 to 10 routes and reduce the load on bus drivers, reduce their turnaround time from middle school to elementary. And that's better for retention as well, because there's less stress on that bus. So it is a possible improvement. So I recognize efficiency and customer service are 2 totally different things. Customer service is seeing the driver on campus at 4:05 ready to receive children, versus me saying I can turn a bus around 4 times with 80 kids on each bus. Yeah, we can do it. Should we? We should probably focus on some customer service too. So that's a possible improvement.
So yeah, just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, we're saying basically the 1.7 is based on an increase of current costs. With our current schedule, we could basically potentially do it with our current costs or up to $1.3 million if we want to tweak things essentially. Is that what
No,
you're saying?
so if we do nothing, remove the possible improvements, our annual operating expense stays the same, plus 3%, year over year inflation. If we want to add 8 to 10 routes to improve turnaround time, we are going to have to buy buses, recruit drivers, etc. Maybe add another recruiter, maybe add a router, whatever we need to do to get there. And that's factored into $1.3 million additional year over year over year, on top of what we're doing today. Okay.
Winnie, is there any questions from the chat?
So there are two statements in the chat regarding these two options. Michelle says, so it appears that the only difference between options 1 and 4 is swapping elementary and middle school. That still doesn't solve the issue of the late buses. All it would do is switch late buses in the afternoon to the middle school level.
And that's a fair point. And also one thing that I forgot to mention, I mean, one of the things that the stakeholder committee was really careful about doing is not shifting the problem from one grade band to another, right? And so what we didn't want to have happen was fix a problem for elementary school, but then create a problem for junior high or middle school. And so yes, there are minor differences, and sometimes, we tried not to just kind of shift it as much as possible, but yes, that was a challenge.
And then Tiffany commented, moving elementary earlier reduces bus driver shortage in the afternoons when bus drivers have to leave their assigned routes to drive for a field trip, sports, band, choir, robotics, etc. It's easier to double up junior high and high school than it is to double up elementary or middle.
Thank you, Tiffany. I think you have some experience there. So I agree with everything you're saying. Middle school also requires the least amount of buses. So if it goes last, we would have more drivers available to do trips at 3:45, 4 o'clock. So I think you're right on point with that observation. And thank you for the feedback.
Other questions from my in-person audience? One more. Okay.
I know. Sorry. I just wanted to check too, because and this is me not knowing what I'm talking about here, but wasn't there discussion like if we staggered high school and junior high, wouldn't that allow to compress some of those times because we essentially have shorter routes when we do that even with the 4 tier?
So that example, Brad, is 3.
But he's saying, could we maintain
No.
a 4-tier?
I was talking about, I know with combining junior high and high school, I was talking about like, I know that we've had discussions like if we did elementary and then junior high and then middle school and then high school, for example, or any mix of those, that actually shortens that 35-minute turnaround because we aren't in a centralized location with elementary and middle school.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there's what's called in the industry like deadhead. It's like drive time without students. So we want to reduce that turnaround time to the next school. And if you do it in the fashion that was just described, yes, there would be efficiencies. I'll be honest, Brad and group, I did not get that granular in our research, but I can tell you just from logistics and planning and being in the business, yes, you're going to find some efficiencies. I don't have a dollar figure or a bus figure to give, but you're right. We'll find savings there.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Any more in the chat, Whitney? Okay. All right. So let's start talking about this then. And I'm going to put these different options back up on the screen before I ask you about it. But let's talk about your current schedule just for 1 second, though. How well do you feel like the current schedule meets you and your family's needs? So you've got a couple options here. You can choose poses frequent challenges for me and my family. You can say it's fine. We work with it, right? We're used to it. We have some challenges, but it works for us overall. Or you love it. It meets my needs very well. that some thought. All right. Excellent. I'm just waiting for it to slow down, so it looks like folks have gotten it in. All right. Looks like everyone's voted. Okay. So let's talk about option 2 first. All right. So just as a reminder, again, option 2 is prioritizing that sleep research. It is starting our younger students earlier, starting our older students later to follow that. And this would change our bus system from a 4-tier to a 2-tier. The other thing that I just want to note with this option, we looked at several different variations of this. I mean, I think in total, the stakeholder committee evaluated 7 different options. There are different variations on this that have high schools starting at 8:30, just moving things up, or starting at 9, right? Ultimately, I mean, we chose one to share here in the middle because, again, all of those options that really focused on prioritizing the sleep research and getting those adolescents to school later, all of those created a 2-tier system for us. So again, there are slight variations on this, but ultimately, this was the one that we felt would kind of match best. So thinking about this option, what I want to know, there's 3 different questions here. And so this is a scale, and you should be able to, pull yourself on either side from strongly disagree to strongly agree. So the first question is, this option would mean that I would have to find and pay for new or additional childcare. If this option doesn't apply for you, you can skip it. Our second question, I believe this option would best support student learning and health, even if it doesn't work logistically, right? But is that how we're feeling, that that is a good choice there? And then also knowing that, these options have price tags attached to them, I would support efforts by the district to get funding for additional buses and drivers to make this option possible. Not saying how that's going to happen, not saying how long that would take or what it would take, but if the district decided to go down that route, if we all as a community, decide to go down that route, would that be something that you would support? Anybody having challenges with the scale option? No, working? Okay, great.
Someone in the chat is asking, can you pull the times up again?
Sure. Yep. Absolutely. So essentially this the earliest start time here is 8 a.m. for elementary school. High school gets shifted to 8:45. Great. Okay. Let's see. All right, good. Okay, we stopped moving. All right, so everybody's voted for the most part. 10 more seconds. All right, good. Okay, let's talk about option 3 now. Option 3, again, the focus here is getting students out earlier. This is our 3-tier system combining junior high and high school routes, more moderate changes to the schedule, but again, really focused on particularly elementary school and middle school, getting them out a little bit earlier. All right, so when we think about option 3, do you think that this option would positively impact your family's current schedule or needs? Again, moderate increases, about 15 minutes, 10 minutes. Junior high goes a little bit later, which also shifts, obviously, their start time out a little bit. Okay, so would positively impact your family's current schedule or needs? Do you believe this option would better meet teachers' needs for better work-life balance? And again, would you support efforts by the district to get funding for the additional buses or drivers to make this option possible? Go ahead and weigh in on your Excellent.
Michelle in the chat says something else to consider with having anything but elementary as the late dismissal. If the middle school is the latest dismissal, that means that there will be more families picking up their children. Those roads, Harmon, Diley, and Tollgate, are already very congested. Middle school and elementary families pick up their children now from school because the buses are late, my family included, as my daughter doesn't get home on the bus until about 4:45 with after school activities starting at 5.
And yep, good point. All right. Okay. Finish weighing in on this one. Okay. Excellent. All right. Option 4, prioritizing student safety. So again, this one of the biggest changes here that you'll see is junior high, starting them later. So, really driven by this desire not to have any children, starting at 7:15, just because it means that they then have to be on the bus so early and often in dark hours. So this option maintains that 4-tier bus system with some slight modifications. So we would need a little bit of extra help there, but really gets junior high out or starting later. Also shifts elementary up, though, to address those afternoon attention concerns that we have heard. Okay, so for option 4, this option would allow me to maintain my current childcare options. Strongly agree or strongly disagree on that one? And again, if you do not care about childcare right now, then you can skip that. I believe this option would improve student safety when traveling to and from school. Does this schedule option accomplish that, is the question there. And then our third question there, this option would benefit student learning. So I'll give you some time to think about that. Okay. Sorry, folks. You can only vote if you're looking at this slide, so. But if you want me to go back, happy to. All right. We got that in. Still moving around a little bit. Okay, great. Okay. So when we think about these different options, which option would you prefer the most, right? You don't have to love it necessarily. You don't have to, feel like it's perfect. But out of these 4, just out of curiosity, which one would you say is the best, or at least the closest, right, to what you're looking for? So option 1, which is the do nothing option. Option 2 prioritizes sleep research. So your older students starting school much later in the day, also then getting out later. Option 3, trying to shift most of those students up, particularly elementary. And then option 4 prioritizes student safety. Biggest factor in that is not having students trying to start their day at 7:15 a.m.
Can we show the options again, please?
Um, sure. Not going to show option 1 because you all have been living with that schedule for a while. All right. Going back to which one do you prefer the most? Okay. Nope. All right. Nope. Okay, looks like we've landed. All right. Which of these options do you prefer the least? So again, none of them are perfect, but which one would you struggle with the most? All right, everybody's voted in? Okay. All right. So this next question, and this should be a text based. You can write in a response. But I'm just kind of curious if you think about the option that you chose as you find the most attractive, right? Or even thinking, about what your desired end goal for this conversation is. How would that schedule change benefit you? What kinds of benefits would you see? So there are different options. Okay, excellent. So you can say less struggle. You can say maybe it would improve transportation. Maybe it works better with my work schedule. Maybe my kid would be less tired. Just how do you feel? What kind of benefits? How would your life be better if your preferred schedule was implemented? And this is important for us to really kind of understand. Again, we don't want to just know who likes this and who doesn't. We want to understand the impact. And so that's what we're trying to understand here is how does this affect you directly? Excellent. Good. Great. I'll give a few more seconds on this. But I'm seeing a lot about sleep, seeing a lot about safety and extracurriculars. Awesome. All right. Okay. Now, the other thing is, we did talk about concerns during our first listening session. Now that we've put some more meat on the bones, though, and talked about what some possible tangible options would be, I'm curious what kinds of concerns you might still have about these. And again, this is a text message response. It's not going to do word cloud. This is going to be you can write maybe a little bit longer than the word cloud was allowing. Right? Exactly. That's a great one. What other concerns when you think about, these options or a schedule change in general, right? What is still kind of giving you pause? Mm. The traffic congestion issue, which I know we had a comment about in the chat as well. That is definitely something that is certainly a challenge and a difficult one, to kind of plan around, but one that we definitely should be aware of. Yep. Oh, got some stuff about IEP minutes. Mm. Not sure why one of those is in a box, but okay. Any other responses for current concerns based on this? And again, this information is going to be downloaded so that we can really spend time with it and dig through it. So don't worry, we will have all of this captured. Oh, rolling in. Right, I guess we're capping out at 30. Oh, all right. Excellent. Okay, great. All right, we'll leave this open here for a second because no. Okay, so while folks are continuing to populate this, this is the information that we have to share, and appreciate the reactions that you've had to it. I do want to open the floor up right now, though, while we have the time, for any additional comments, questions, maybe that have come up as we've continued to discuss this. Questions about either the process or the options. Yes.
For option 4, is it possible to switch the junior high school just because I know it has the high school being able to stand at a bus stop earlier, but it also puts the 60% of the high school kids who are drivers for getting a ride on the road potentially before roads are cleared or they're available. So it would alter a little bit what our current junior high and high school is by pushing the current junior high back a little and pushing the current high school up a little, I think.
From a busing logistics standpoint, yes. That would work. That would be fine.
Any questions or comments in the chat? No? All right.
Michelle asks, will the decision makers shadow families, students, and staff to see how dismissal works now and what might work best in the future?
Shadowing at the schools. Is that what you mean, Michelle?
Yes.
Yes.
At
Okay.
dismissal.
Okay. I think that there are certainly eyes on the school, but yeah, there's additional observations. But I think, yeah. Okay. Yes, the answer, Michelle. Any other questions, concerns? Okay. All right. Well, okay, I think we've tapped out on that. All right. Oh. Okay. Here's a fun little feature that I did not think was going to work, but you do have the ability to vote or to kind of like co-sign on some of the comments that were written prior in the previous questions. So on Menti right now, you should be able to see those previous ones. If there's any that you want to co-sign, just go ahead and click it, give it a little check on there just so that we know the magnitude of that. So that we know if 5 people share that concern or just one. So feel free to-
Leslie Tom is asking, what's the next step in this process?
Yep, absolutely. I'm going to get to that in 1 second, Tom. Okay, so while voting is happening, so the next step in this process is to take this data that we've received tonight, because really this decision needs to be grounded in the community, right? The PLSD community. And we recognize that there aren't actually a lot of perfect options when we're talking about this, when we're talking about schedule changes. It impacts everybody differently. And that means that the impacts are kind of all over the place. And there are, obviously logistical constraints then as well. And not just the buses, right? We're also talking about just, student learning and teacher contracts and childcare availability and all of those different things. And so this is a really complicated topic. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this data and really kind of understand which option seems like it would fit the best for the community as a whole. And so then from there, we will develop a recommendation to give to the school board. Again, I just want to emphasize, I know that I've been in front of you all for the last 3 listening sessions. Raymond Consulting is not making this decision, right? That is why we have the stakeholder committee to really kind of drive that. And that is why we have been really intentional about sharing information and gathering feedback from you all. This presentation is going to be available online, and we will try to recreate this Mentimeter form as well, so that if you know folks that hadn't participated, they can still, make sure that they're sharing their feedback. It might not be as crisp and clean as this, but making sure that that is still an option. And then we will issue a summary of this meeting, put that on the website as well as the video so that anybody can go back and look at this, as well as then sharing information about the proposal that will be developed for the school board. So again, our goal here is that this is a transparent process, that everybody understands how we got to the decisions that we've made. And so if at any point in time you feel like you need more information, you absolutely can reach out via your communication channels and share that information. We'll be happy to help answer those questions. So ultimately, again, the goal is to have a proposal in front of the school board by the end of January. And so that is our deadline for this. Now, any decision that's made, I don't think is necessarily planning on being implemented for this coming fall. Because it sounds like there's a lot of prep work and everything that would need to happen. So if a schedule change is determined to be a good option moving forward, then there will be additional work that needs to happen in order to make that happen. And so I think we were thinking not until school year 27-28, correct, Rob?
Correct. So to give some context to the options at the bottom of, or the requirements of each option of 2 years of planning and acquisition, buses are on a 15-month lead time. So to put an order in to, let's say, Thomas, Bluebird, International buses, each one's going to tell us about 15 months. That takes capital. That takes time. And in the meantime, we have to net, for example, I'm looking at option 4 on my computer. That requires 16 new drivers. That's a net 16 new drivers. So we're going to lose some people over the next couple of years. So we have to fill the positions of people who resign and then add an additional 16. So really that could be, based on our attrition, that could be more like 30 drivers that come through the pipeline. And there's so many things that go into getting 30 drivers behind the wheel. We need all of that time to make sure that we make this right. Whatever plan we go with, we need to make it right. So that's going to be my focus of whatever the board decides to do through the recommendation process. My goal is to hit this out of the park for everybody. So we need time and we need money.
Okay. All right. Final questions, comments, anything in the chat, Whitney? Okay. Any final comments from the district? All right. So, yes.
I had one comment that I think that should be addressed. I think there was some consistent concern in there where folks are asking, has the decision been made? And so I think to make it clear that this truly is an opportunity to gain some feedback from everyone that will be impacted, whether there is a change or there is not a change. And so, Rob, I appreciate you saying, whatever we do, let's knock it out the park. Because at the end of the day, serving on the stakeholder committee, and I appreciate that opportunity. I think one of the things that should be known is we value our staff and our teachers. We also value the safety of our students, and we value that time that kids have with their families, and what it means for that time in terms of expediting how they get home safely. So no, a decision has not been made. And so a lot of time and consideration has gone into trying to check all the boxes, although we know we're not going to accommodate everyone's needs at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we're putting forth the best plan possible for our district. So I think to let folks know that decision has not been made.
Excellent. Yes, and thank you. Because yes, there has not been a decision. There's not even necessarily leaning towards a decision, right? The goal of the stakeholder committee was to identify options that we felt like reflected what we've heard from the community, and then, to get reactions to those direct options. So yes, thank you for highlighting that, and please understand, there are no decisions right now. I can honestly say all of us are going to walk into a room and say, okay, here's what we heard. And, what do we do with it now? And that's where we're all at right now. So
Tiffany commented, switching from a 4 tiers to a 3 or 2 tier may reduce income for bus drivers.
She knows what she's talking about. That is a real concern. Thank you, Tiffany. So very keen on how this works. Yes, that is a real concern for me in particular on if we reduce the tier structure, because we have retention concerns. And the last thing we want to do is build something here that doesn't work and drivers leave for other opportunities. So very keen observation. We could make that up in other ways, like a higher wage. But again, that's ultimately up to the Board of Education to make that decision. But with all things considered, you're 100% on track that we would end up reducing overall hours for drivers if we go from a 4 to a 3 or to a 2. So thank you for that question.
all right. Any other? I know I've said this 5 times now, but they keep trickling in. So I want to leave it open because we want to hear everything. Okay. All right. Well, then I am happy to, make sure that you all get home, hopefully get some dinner. And again, we will post the video of this as well as the PowerPoint. You can also see then the results of that live polling, and send out additional information. And we will keep you updated once the committee comes up with the next step and share that with you before it goes to the school board. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.